If people find this jarring, be jarred. Here's a black man wearing a Make America Great Again hat. Okay? Are you not entertained? Whoever my VP pick's gonna be, it will be a woman of color.
If you said, I'm going to be picking a running mate and it's going to be a white male, that doesn't work.
Do you think that Kamala Harris was qualified to be the vice presidential pick? Talk about some politics, man.
Okay.
I mean,
let's get into it.
It's November 22nd.
Yeah.
What was election day? Election day was 2 weeks ago?
5th. Yeah.
Okay, so we're a little bit past like 2 weeks from being at election day. I had someone on my other podcast the other day, and we talked. She's a marketing expert, and we talked about business owners coming out for political candidates and how in cancel culture, like, people just aren't willing to say what they think, and that we're held hostage by not being allowed to say what you really think. You know that you can hit some issues that everybody agrees on, and you talk about those politically, but you're not willing to really go and say, oh, I'm for Biden or I'm for Trump. I don't want to alienate 50% of my customers. And I'm like, no. What's your market share today? Are you at 1% market share? Most companies aren't even close to 1% market share. So you're telling me there's a higher chance that you lose your less than 1% market than that you align with a bunch of people who are out there that voted for the same candidate you did, who are like, oh, okay, you're my people. I'll do business with you, maybe. There's a much higher chance of that happening, in my opinion, than that you lose the customers that you have. Now, if you're Michael Jordan and you're already at 50% market share, I like what he says about, hey, Republicans buy sneakers too. Like, why piss them off? You have a huge amount of market share. But if you're at 1%, come on. Like, really?
Well, look, some industries are different. Not every industry is the same, right? So if you're in the farming industry, it's probably not a good idea for you to be a Kamala Harris promoter, right? Yeah. You may lose a lot of customers that way. I think equally, there are certain industries that kind of cater towards the big cities. So think about, like, you know, law, finance, to some extent technology. It kind of depends on the industry that you're in, but you could very easily alienate yourself around a political topic if you're not careful. And I've actually even found myself in my space. Sometimes you're just kind of sitting back and waiting to see what does the person across the table from you say, and then you can decide if you want to go down that topic or not, right? So if they're talking about how much they hate Trump, and it's like, oh yeah, I don't love the guy, you know. But even then, I still find myself guarded in some areas. But let me ask you this, because you were out there on Instagram with the reels, and I guess I would brand you as the other black guy who supported Trump, because I only ever saw the two. There's the one that goes to his rallies, and then there was you, who had the Make America Great Again hat on. And it was the funniest thing to me, because I had multiple people, more than a handful, who reached out to me to check on me, to make sure I was okay, because they saw your videos. And they're like, dude, that's your brother? Like, he's black and he supports Trump? Like, doesn't he understand that Trump he's a misogynist, he's a racist, just go down all the list of all these different things. And it really brought to my attention how little room there is in this country for people to actually have an opinion. I always love when people say, in politics, nobody wants to hear your opinion. They want to hear their opinion coming out of your mouth. So I am with all of that. But I will also say, as a black man, half black, okay, I'm gonna keep my black card today.
There we go.
There is something still jarring when you see a black person wearing a MAGA hat. You just see it and you're like, whoa, like what? It's unexpected. So, like, clearly you were ready to make a stand, put your opinions out there. You just kind of gave us a sense of how you kind of see it not hurting your business and potentially helping your business. So what made you feel strongly enough about, was it an issue? Is it the person? I know it's business related, but like, what made you get there?
Yeah.
To be able to put it out there like that and say, I'm voting Trump, blacks for Trump, Trump for business, let's go.
Yeah. I mean, it's a hard question to answer. But before I do, I would be remiss if I didn't say that I did bring some props today. So, if people find this jarring, be jarred. Here's a black man wearing a Make America Great Again hat. Okay?
I'm glad
are
brought
you
the
not
props.
entertained?
Yeah. See, this is crazy. If you just make this the clip or the thumbnail, there's going to be a million people who want to see this because we got two guys talking about politics. I'll be fully transparent. I voted for Harris. I didn't love either candidate on either side.
Yeah.
I've actually been very vocal about the fact that I dislike Kamala Harris. From the time she was picked as vice president, I have told so many people over the years, why didn't we get Susan Rice? Biden said he was going to go ahead and nominate a black woman. Susan Rice was on the list. How did we get stuck with Kamala?
Well, let's start with that.
I don't even get it.
Let's just start with that.
Yeah.
How do we get to a point as a country where we think it's a good idea for the president to come out and say, whoever my VP pick's going to be, it will be a woman of color. And we're all kind of like, oh, good for you, Biden. Like, oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
Like, that's a really good idea.
Yeah.
We tried it in the boardroom. Like, it didn't work there. Like, DEI, where it's at today, it has not gotten companies further by just putting people into positions that they're not qualified for. But Biden's doing that for the person who's literally a breath away from being in the presidency and saying, whatever it is, it's going to be a black woman because we're going to bring up black women with my pick here. Why is that something that's okay? Like, what if I just decided, you know what? There's going to be a board seat open on every board in the Fortune 500, and I want to put a black dude from the hood on the board of every company in the Fortune 500. That's a good idea, right? Because our diversity is our strength.
Yeah.
Well, is it though?
So the opposite does not work. I will concede that if you said, I'm going to be picking a running mate and it's going to be a white male, that doesn't work. And people would be up in arms. Like, what? A white male? So it is problematic. But here's the thing. I feel like this is about DEI in general, and I really think it was a mistake to lump those together because we got DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Nobody has a problem with inclusion. We're going to include everybody at the same rate. Okay, anybody has an opportunity. I think everyone's okay with that. Diversity is a little bit more focused in saying, let's look at who we already have and let's start to report on that and let's make sure that we're becoming more representative over time, right? So let's first measure it though. And I think 90% of people think that, hey, diversity is a good thing. And it's not just race, gender, sexual orientation.
I disagree with that. I'll allow you to finish, but I disagree with that fact.
Okay, I'm glad you can weigh in on it. But I think 90% of companies look at diversity overall and say, this is better. We're getting different ideas, different thoughts. And especially when a product that we're building or the thing that we're putting out to market is developed by people who are representative of both the communities and the companies and everything that we're trying to bring together, that you do put together a better product from that standpoint. And I've seen that time and time again. But here's the sticking point. This is where we fall apart, is we lumped it all together with equity. And I think we used to call it equality, and we were all okay with equality. But equity is a totally different conversation. And that's where you're saying, hey, there should be, if the population is 15% black, then 15% of the people need to be this color, right? It's not like we're moving that direction because we're empowering people in other ways. That is saying, no, we're going to get there now. And that's where you run into people who are being put into positions that they are not qualified for. And we have seen this time and time again. And this is the pushback that you're getting on equity. My problem here is this. Why are we throwing out the D and the I that most people support because we don't like the E? let's pause the E and still focus on diversity and still be inclusive. Like, we don't have to lump them together. So that's my piece.
Look,
you can disagree with it.
A lot to unpack there, and I want to get to all of it sequentially. But let's deal with where we probably agree the most, and that's on the E, on the equity. That it doesn't make sense to put people in positions that they're not qualified to do. But here's a yes or no question for you. Do you think that Kamala Harris was qualified to be the vice presidential pick and have equity over all of the other potential candidates? Because you've already said, why not Susan Rice?
Yeah. I don't think she was less qualified than Susan Rice. I just think Kamala's not likable. And we already knew that about her because she had run and the voters had said, we don't like her. That's the reason why she didn't even make it to Iowa.
But you think that she was qualified to be vice president?
I mean, she was the Attorney General of the state of California.
Okay.
And then she was a senator. What more qualifications do you need? She's had that experience. She's served in the Senate. I believe when she was on the Senate, I know she was on multiple committees. I believe she was chair of a committee. Like, she spent time in government, but I didn't see her being unqualified compared to other vice presidential picks.
I saw her
J.D. Vance.
I saw her as being unqualified.
Is she less qualified than J.D. Vance?
Let me tell you what I saw. I saw someone who ran for president and got 0 votes.
Yeah.
Like 0. Like, nobody ever cast a vote for Kamala Harris, ever. Didn't even make it to Iowa because the people said no. Not just the people, her people said no. Democrats said no to her. They said anybody else but her. And then all of a sudden, she's the most qualified person to become the vice president, a breath away from the presidency. When all the people said, no, not her, like anybody else, there were 11 people up on that stage. She was one of the ones that was kind of falling off the end, along with Marianne Williamson. They said Marianne Williamson over her. Marianne Williamson over her.
Yeah.
So I look at that and I say, it's not me saying that she wasn't qualified. It's Democrats that said she wasn't qualified for that position. But yet we just put her into that position. Why? Because she was a woman of color. And there were only a few to choose from. So, who was going to be the best pick for that? So they just picked her name out of a hat. She's not likable. Everybody already knew that. And yet, that's who we picked to be our vice president. After all Democrats said, no, not her, please not her, please not her.
Yeah.
And then you get to this election cycle and she's like, all of a sudden she's like, the 30% approval ratings don't matter anymore. She's the godmother of the Democratic Party, like the new coming of Barack Obama. And it's like, that didn't fool anybody. No, she didn't become any more likable as that campaign went on. As much as they hid her away from everyone, the people didn't want her. Her people didn't want her. And that was always the problem.
I will say, the likability ratings did change, or her favorability. Like, as soon as she became the nominee, it went from low 30s to it spiked up. I don't forget the numbers.
Only
she had
polls.
A huge spike from that standpoint. But yeah, and that could very well not even be related whatsoever. I'm not happy about the way we ended up with Harris as a candidate. I didn't like her when she was vice president. I disagree with you. I think she was as qualified as J.D. Vance or any of the other vice presidents that we've had, or picks that we've had in the past. But I don't think that she was less qualified.
We never had an opportunity with J.D. Vance to see what the people thought of him. Again, this VP pick, the way it's done, take me back to the late 1700s when the person that came in second became the vice president. That is equity, okay? You want to talk about some equity? That's how they did it. The second place person becomes the vice president.
How is that equity? How's that equity?
It's equity because you didn't come in first. You came in second. You get the second in command job to that president who did come in first.
Okay.
And so you earned the spot that you got by the people. The people said you were our next pick. So if we didn't pick this guy, you came in second place. A lot of people thought you were qualified to be in that role. So equitably, we can say that you're qualified to be the vice president. And in case that president does die, you go right into that role.
I would say it's more logical. I don't get the equity piece. But look, the vice president could not matter less in today's day and age. You say a breath away from the presidency, okay, that's
doesn't
fine.
matter until it matters. And we're talking about 80-year-old men who will probably conk out. It's inevitability. I mean, these people are old, and the vice president matters more and more when you see the declining health of the people who are running as president. But I want to run back a little bit and talk about the diversification or the diversity side, the D in the DEI.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Because
what's the problem with the D?
We disagree on that, and I'll show you where. You articulated that 90% of people are okay with the D. They're okay with diversity. And my problem with it is that Democrats and Republicans mean different things when they say we're okay with diversity. Republicans say, hey, you know what? Diversity is a good thing. It's good for us to be exposed to other nationalities and other people groups and to raise our kids amongst them. Wasn't always that way, but it also wasn't that way for the Democratic Party either. So I'm just pointing out that most Republicans say, yeah, diversity is a good thing. Democrats say, oh, diversity is our strength. It's a strength. That's why we need DEI, because diversity is our strength. How? I don't understand how diversity is a strength. Like, what is it about diversity that makes it a strength? That means that we should put people into positions that they're not qualified for just because it's diversity.
I think you're getting stuck on equity when you're talking about diversity, because you're saying like we need to put people in positions.
That's a fair point. Let me reframe it.
They don't deserve to be in.
Let me reframe it.
Right?
Why does, if you're in a population of people that is 50% white and 50% black, why do we need to see 50% representation of blacks and whites in leadership positions in that community? Why does it matter that the board of the company that's in that community is being run by 50% blacks, 50% whites? Why can't that just be like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, based on the quality of their character, not based on the color of their skin?
Yeah. So you're asking people to be colorblind before we fix the problem, right? And I think that's the challenge here. I think colorblind is what we should be going for. We don't need to see colors. And look, for my kids, I can already see, like when they go hang out with other kids, they're not noticing if that person's black, white, Asian. Like they don't even, it doesn't even come across as anything. I've noticed it with even looking at generations beneath ours, Gen Z. Like the number of people who are in multiracial relationships is crazy. Like that, and so clearly people are moving past that. But look, from a diversity standpoint, for diversity making us stronger, making us better, I'll talk about it from a corporate standpoint, right? Like if you're creating a product or a service, and the people who are building that, the people who work for that company, there's such low representation when it comes to women, when it comes to black people, Hispanic people, when that's a big portion of who you're going to be serving, it's hard to make sure that you have that point of view taken into account for what you're building. So yeah, you can actually, and this has been studied, there's a big study that they did in being able to show the economic impact of diversity. I believe NMSDC funded this along with a few others. Now, they have some bias, of course, because they're the big minority council that's focused on small businesses. But at the end of the day, it's important to be able to make sure that you actually have that representation at the table to make sure that you can build the best product and service to serve those people. And so like when I think about it for our business, yes, we want as much diversity as possible. We want to make sure that as both with our core teams, our teams that are working with our customers outside, that we are building a business, we're building a service that is going to be able to benefit the customers we have, the communities that we work in, and that looks like those groups as well. Like that's important to us, and I think it makes us better. We get a whole different perspective. We talked about this last time. It's not just racial. Socioeconomic status is huge, right? There's so many different thoughts and opinions that people have based on the environment that they grew up in. It happens in this country that the race that you are often correlates to your socioeconomic status, right? So if you have more black people on the team, you probably have a lot more people who grew up poor. Or who know what it's like to live in an apartment versus a house.
All of
right?
that sounds perfectly good until I say to you, okay, let me get a dude from the hood on the board of every Fortune 500 company then. Is that adding value? Is that adding strength to that company? Because this is the issue with it. You talk about fixing the problem, and let's bring black people up before we talk about, like, it doesn't matter, let's judge them on the quality of their character. The government has tried this, and the government's very bad because you really can't legislate in the gray areas. The problem with it is that the government says, okay, let's bring black people up. Let's set up the 8A certification for government contracts to make sure that black people are getting government contracts, and they're here and they're represented and they're winning economically from the tax dollars that are being paid out to businesses in our country. Okay, the only problem with that is that the people that really need the help aren't getting an 8A contract. It's the black guy who was already winning, who was already super articulate, whitewashed, college educated, and already had a business and was close to a hub zone that is winning those contracts. That's who's winning it. It's not bringing up people from the hood and getting people out of poverty.
No.
It's basically keeping them in there and helping the other black people become millionaires and billionaires.
No. This is where you're getting it wrong, because yes, is America doing enough for diversity? Absolutely not. No one's pulling people out of the hood and putting them on the board of a Fortune 500 company. But they are taking people like you and me and putting us into those positions, right? Why? Yes, we have those experiences. Yes, we happen to be black. Yes, we're also articulate, and we were taught respect at an early age. And so, like, we grew up and it was yes, sir, and yes, ma'am, all this stuff. We were corrected anytime we started using words, ebonics, right? Like, it was the biggest issue in the world. Like, our parents wanted to wash our mouth out with soap if we were using some of these words. And I'm thankful for that every day, but here's where you're getting it wrong. When we get into those positions, now, do we make it easier for someone who didn't necessarily have all the leg ups that we had because of how we came up to be able to get into a position? Yeah, maybe we do. Do we have access for people who did grow up in an environment that was different? Can we bring people out of the hood and get them into positions that at least get them the foot in the door with the company, and now they have the chance to start to move up.
It all sounds fine.
100% is. It is happening. It's happening.
This is the problem,
and especially it's happening with small businesses.
No,
small businesses are hiring tons of people like that.
I think we cannot forget that the black man who succeeds in this country, who separated himself from the hood, judges the people in the hood more than white people judge people in the hood. Because he's like, look, I made it out. Here's why I made it out. I made different decisions than you did. My decisions mattered. And you made poor decisions, therefore you are still here. I made right decisions, therefore I'm here. And why would I go down and bring you up here with me just because I have the opportunity? No, I want to hire the best people for the business. We're going to get the business further with the goals.
Yeah.
And that's the problem with it, is that in this day and age, for people to be embracing this ideal of being inarticulate, sounding like you don't have a grade school education, and that's cool, and the hairstyles are cool, and we have all these NBA athletes and NFL athletes that made it out from doing that, but the people that made it out because they focused on sounding intelligent and getting skills and getting degrees and moving on in life, we call it whitewashed. They're becoming more like white people. Well, I know a lot of poor white people who don't sound articulate too. So let's just stop talking it whitewashed and maybe just call it, hey, they want to sound intelligent because they've educated themselves and they've moved themselves up to a certain status in life that, yes, there are more white people who have done that than there are black people, but those people judge the people in the hood and say, hey, if you talk the way you talk, you're never going to have the things I have. It's just not going to happen.
I don't think that's true. I think it might be true for some people. And I don't think that that's a great quality to have, because there's a whole other side that I see. And I'm plugged into a entrepreneur group here in Charlotte, but I'm seeing a whole different side of people who have made it, and now they want to lift up as many people as they can. They want to give them access to the opportunities, because I think that there's like this concept that every person in your business has to be super polished, and again, we're talking about how they're articulating things and all that kind of stuff. And maybe like if you need a person who's done operations, right? Like that can look very different. They don't all have to look the same. I heard of someone, I chuckled a little bit, but I heard someone making the argument that we should hire more gang more people who are gang affiliated because they get operations down to a T. Like supply chain, oh man, they got supply chain down. Like distribution, oh easy, right? So I'm not saying that that's necessarily the path, but I thought it was kind of funny, and it's
they're also liable to shoot your customers if they cheat on you. You know, like it's like that's great for business. You know.
Yeah. We're probably gonna continue to disagree here, but I don't think that that's all. That's all, and we're gonna just speak in terms of black people because that's easy for us. Black person who makes it, do they decide to keep living in the hood? Absolutely not.
Exactly.
Do they move? Do they go to the gated community if they can? Join the country club if they can? 100% they do that. But I don't think it changes the fact that many that I know, and that's anecdotal, I don't have data around it, but they continue to support their community. They continue to look for opportunities to engage the community.
Come on, you start a foundation.
To teach people.
It's like they start a foundation and they go and take the foundation to the hood. They don't want their kids hanging out in the hood. They don't want their wife hanging out in the hood.
Correct.
They don't really want to be in the hood that much. They'll show up for the ribbon cutting ceremony for that building, but they're not spending their time there. They might throw their money down there, but I don't see that as them bringing people up and looking at that and saying, because if black people believed that diversity was a strength, you'd see it happening a lot more. There's a lot of black CEOs out there. It used to be a lot less. There's a lot of black CEOs, and their boards look pretty much the same as the white CEOs. And we have to ask ourselves why that is. It's because they're going for the competent people who are qualified for that position. Now, I've got a business coach, white guy's on the board of a couple different companies, and he's articulated to me, he goes, Steve, if I hadn't gotten these board positions when I did, pre-2020, he said there's no chance. No chance in the world I'd get them today. Why? Because I'm a white guy.
Yeah.
I'm a 50-year-old white guy. That's why I can't be on the board of a company. So we are disqualifying qualified people for this dream of diversity and equity. I'll blend the two together for this and saying, hey, you know what is funny about race? This is the hilarious thing about race to me. There's levels of who's allowed to talk shit about who when it comes to race. And it also includes like LGBTQ and all of that. But what is ubiquitous across the board is that anyone is allowed to shit on white men right now. Doesn't matter what race you are. Now, if you're Hispanic, you can't say things about black people, but you can hate on white men. If you're black, you can talk about black people, but don't hate on the Hispanic. Hey, but you can talk about white men all you want because we have to hate on white men. So we're disqualifying people who truly are qualified just because of the color of their skin. And this is the opposite of what Martin Luther King wanted us to be thinking about 60 years later from his speech. And we got to wrap it up, so I'll give you the last word.
Okay. Well, all I would say is there's a lot that I agree with there, but I really feel strongly about the fact that if we just removed equity from the conversation and we can keep the best parts of the D and the I think a lot of people can get behind that. And it's important. We need to get that done.
Fair enough. Good conversation.